The following program is intended for mature audiences.
Shalom and welcome to the synagogue. This is a podcast for consenting adults for information, education, and entertainment on BDSM, sexuality, and all things related. If you're not a legal, enthusiastically consenting adult, then
pick up the needle, press pause, or turn the radio off.
For those who remain, now might be a good time to switch to your headphones.
Welcome to the synagogue. I am your host. They call me the rabbi.
Pretty fly for a rabbi.
I put the sin in synagogue, and I am a cisgender, ambimorous, gynosexual, sadistic, bratty daddy doll. Sex therapist by day, kink educator by night, and in both these roles I help people make their kink a religious experience. While I am a mental health professional, this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only and is not a replacement for therapy. Seek out the assistance of a trained professional for help with your specific situation. Hosting with me today is my partner, my ADHD squirrel wrangler, my submissive, my brat, my little, my pony, or just my little pony. The Bullwinkle to my Rocky, little bit. This is episode number 8, and with us today is WhipFather to talk about whips.
Hi, thank you for having me today.
Learn the basic practices of whip play and a short history lesson. Learn the parts of the whip and the different types of whips and recommendations for setting the scene for mood and risk-aware safety. But first, a word from our sponsor. WhipFather's journey began at 7 with his first whip. He didn't know what that would turn into. When he tied up his boyfriend at 20, he began to suspect. Despite hints of S&M throughout his life, he didn't act on them, staying on the fringe of leather. At 21, he moved from small-town Pennsylvania to San Diego. In 1988, he became clean and sober, later joining Knights of Iron, a clean, sober, gay motorcycle club. Getting involved with other groups, he created Hot Ash San Diego. He learned of Leatherfest 3 and after attending, wanted to get involved. A friend chaired the event and suggested he help with Leatherfest 4 and would eventually encourage him to take his position. WhipFather co-chaired Leatherfest 5. Clean and sober for 5 years, but needing more support, he helped start a leather S&M AA meeting, Sobriety and Miracles, that continues to this day. He served on the board of NLA/Club X for 5 years. In 1997, he attended the first Leather Leadership Conference, began working with MCC, Leather Ministries, and Hemperal Court de San Diego, and set up events for He MSL. In 1998, he co-chaired Leatherfest 10 and provided workshops for Leather Realm and Mr. San Diego Leather. During this time, WhipFather worked on the San Diego Leather History Project, went to school for museum studies, worked full-time, and created whip art, which I am going to ask about later because that sounds fascinating. His honors include a Leather Sentinel Award from NLA San Diego, 1997 Mr. San Diego Leather, Leather Prince for Life with the Hemperal Court de San Diego, Lifetime Achievement Awards from Leatherfest and San Diego Leather Awards. Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence granted the title of Saint Mark. After moving to Cincinnati in 2009, life was simple. He started to venture out, living and playing in the lifestyle again. Since moving, he has hosted men's-only parties and presented for TPAC, Cincinnati Leather, and Claw, including single-tail workshops, extreme whipping, cigar play, and crucifixion. He currently works with recovery and lifestyle and leads a full, unexpected life. He has the best boy ever, is happy, in love, and enjoys life to the fullest. With 35 plus years of experience, he considers himself still teachable, wanting to learn new things. He comes with old guard experience and changes with today's environment. Welcome to the show, WhipFather.
Thank you.
Tell us about whips.
Well, let's start from the beginning. How does that sound?
Sounds perfect.
So we're going to give you a little a little history lesson.
Okay.
Uh, whips have mostly been used for the control or management of animals you know, without hitting them, and men for the means of punishment. In a time when agriculture, construction work, and transportation were dependent upon animal power, and cattle were raised in the open range, driven to market, and whips were a commonplace of everyday life. There were many types and many styles. Today, the skill is in the workplace largely confined to American and Australian cattlemen. However, it's been maintained and developed by showmen in the Western shows, rodeos, animal trainers in the circuses, if we still have those, I'm not sure about that, and by whip artists in theaters and rent fairs. Most punishment whips have been shorter in lengths, not more than 3 feet long. Long whips were used to drive labor, as in slavery or prison labor, and slaves were often described by the type of whips that were used on them. The Romans introduced whipping into their religious ceremonies, especially the festival of the Lupercal. It's performed in the honor of the god Pan and named for the place under the Palatine Mountain where sacrifices are performed. This takes place on the 15th of February every year. So if you miss Valentine's Day, you have the Lupercal.
Well, there we go.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's my little history lesson of what I have learned over the years.
Okay. So, uh, we have a question from a Twitter follower who wanted to go basic and explain the different types of whips, like bull, signal, snake, etc.
Sure. Um, let's see. There are there are three main types. There's the bullwhip, black snakes, and stock whips. And whatever you use is uh, your personal preference, and it's if not dictated by the availability of where you live. Bullwhips have a hard, rigid handle and are unloaded, and they're braided to the tapering point. And this is a great whip to use. The variation on the bullwhip has a handle that rotates, and it's called the swivel handle bullwhip. Huh. So who knew? The black snakes are also a shot whip. And what I mean by that is the whip is loaded, usually with lead shot, about 2/3 of the length. It doesn't have a rigid handle, and the whips are flexible all the way to the top and the bottom. And this is a good whip for all types of shots. And the black snakes and the bull whips are similar, but can be thought of as American whips. And the bull whip is lighter to carry around. A black snake is smaller, so you can coil that up. They are equivalent in effect, but the bullwhip is known to be more accurate. Now the stock whip, they're a little different, and they have two parts: a handle much like a riding crop, and is braided all the way down to the thong. The whip is hinged to its end and is narrower. Wow, I can't speak today. This is an Australian design, and most Aussie whips are of this kind. It is the most accurate of all of them, very fast in action, but it's harder to master because of the handle and requires more room to throw. It is likely that you will throw a bull whip or a black snake as opposed to a stock whip. Now, I have a couple of more that I want to hit on this topic.
Sure.
Um, Yeah, the single tails or single whips, which those names are interchangeable. They're usually shortest and they're 3 to 4 feet. They lack a fall, and sometimes they're loaded, sometimes they're not. They have a loose, flexible handle permanently attached to the lash and the cracker. These were introduced as dog sled racing whips. although they don't hit the dogs, but they just make the sound. Although the BDSM community has taken over with these because you see them more and more in the dungeons and they're easier to use for the limited space that we have. There's also something called a performance hybrid, or a PH, as the whip people talk about. These are a cross between a stock with a handle and a bullwhip. They are primarily made of nylon material and used for whip cracking enthusiasts. And you see a lot of them used in the Ren Fair and the whip cracking, contest. There's one that happens every year in LA. I've never been, but it's supposed to be fun from what I hear. And there's a couple of more that are not really whips, but they're in the whip family and they're considered whips. So these are galley whips, dragon's tails, paracord whip, which I might add is a great investment until you learn. You can always buy a nice one later when you are comfortable with it.
Nice.
FYI. Quartz, riding crops, yes, they are also in the whip category. Horse buggies, horse buggy whips, which are more like a crop, a cat o' nine tail, cow whips, which are usually nylon rather than leather, and they're used to drive cows and are mostly used in the Philippines these days. Um, Fire whips, and they are played with very differently. I have one, although I've never used it. And special mentions are a shambach, which are massive whips of rhino or hippo skins, and they're used to drive oxen and by the South African, and later they were used by the South African police to control masses during apartheid and riots.
Wow.
Um, I'm not sure how to pronounce this word. I've listened to it a number of times and I still am not sure if I get it right. It's a kalilabin.
Okay.
It's a Chinese word for a unicorn whip used in China and in later the 1900s for martial arts and are made of a steel chain wrapped around leather. So those are all my types of whips
Interesting.
that I'm aware of.
So tell me a little bit about the different parts of a whip. I mean, I know what a handle is, but you mentioned a thong of a whip. I have no idea what that is.
No clue. All right. So, and this is a lot better in person. I'm sorry we're not in person, but I have a whip. I use a bullwhip to demonstrate all of this, but we'll do our best.
That works.
So the principal part of the whip from the top down. So on the top you have the butt or the button, and that's the knob um, at the top, and there may also be a handle loop. Bullwhips usually don't have a handle loop, but singletails and black snakes do. Um, and the reason they do that is because on a bullwhip, when you're using it with cows or cattle, uh, if it got caught, you just let the whip go. If it's connected to your wrist, you can't obviously let it go, and it would pull them, it would pull the cowboys off their horses. So they usually don't have a loop handle.
Mm-hmm.
The handle grip is the next part, and it's often braided a little differently. And they're on a bullwhip, though that's the hard part. That's where you hold it. On a single tail and a black snake, there isn't one of those because they're flexible all the way up. Then that leads into the neck, and that's where it first starts to be flexible and go down. So if you can imagine the hard part on a bullwhip, and then it curves a little bit, that's considered the neck. And then the body or thong is the main part, and that goes all the way down until you get to the point. Um, and the point is the end of where the braiding has happened. Unless we're talking about a single tail, then there is no more after that except the cracker. But on a bullwhip, the next part is a lash or a fall, and that's usually of rawhide latigo strip, and it's attached to the whip at the point, and then the cracker is at the end of the lash or the fall, and that's a replaceable thing for some. a bullwhip, definitely it's replaceable. In a single tail, they're woven in. So if you need that cracker replaced on a single tail, you have to take it to a whip person to fix it for you. So that's kind of the gist of what they look like and what the parts of them.
Those are some really good descriptions for being on a podcast and not having the visual. So appreciate that.
Absolutely.
So, all the different types of whips you mentioned, are they not safe for kink? Because I don't like that word safe, but appropriate for kink.
Well, yes and no. All of them are appropriate. I personally think. However, it also depends on the room that you have. So for me, if I can do a circle around my head with the whip and I have that much space, that's my whip circle. So, that's my top space is the way I look at that. So if you're going to use a 16-foot bullwhip, you have to have 16 feet in front of you, plus your arm length, 16 feet behind you, and 16 feet on both sides. You have to be able to make a circle with that whip. And as long as, a lot of times with bull whips and long whips, they're done outside, as opposed to in a dungeon where we use the 4 foot because they're just easier and not all spaces are available to have that much room. But if you got the room and you can handle it, I say go for it.
So, how do you pick out which type of whip is right for you?
And that goes to skill. I always suggest a paracord whip to start out because when you have those, you're not putting a big investment in. But just because you can pick up a whip and you can make a sound, uh, some people don't have the skill set. And we have plenty of sports that we can play. And maybe whips is not your thing. Maybe electricity is more of your thing. But if you have the skill set and you can do that, for my personal journey, I let whips sing to me. So if I pick up a whip and it feels good in my hand, um, it sings to me and I go, yep, I need that one. And lately the last one I got made, so I didn't really pick it up. I had it made for me, and I have another one on order to be made for me. And and those I wanted with specific colors and something a little different than because a lot of my whips are black, so I wanted something with lots of color and for God's sakes, I am a gay man. I need lots of color. So, you just do your best. But if you have the skills and it talks to you, I say, pick up what's best for you. But know your skills.
So, as somebody who has done flogging before, and if ever wanted to get into whips or you're really, really basic newbie person, what do you recommend to getting started?
Um, I would suggest going to classes for sure, and learning from different people. I and with people, believe it or not, they don't usually work with each other, and so everybody has their own style. And I can tell people that I have trained because they have the same style I do. And other people, they don't have the same style. But going to classes, watching other people, and and if you're a bottom, you know, see if that person is willing to play with you. But first, you need to watch what they do. You have to be able to figure out what's good for you. And we always talk about you know um, risk aware, and there's always going to be risk awareness with whips. It, it always. So I suggest classes and talking to an expert in that field or watching an expert and see if they'll play with you. As far as tops, I say talk to another whip person. Uh, they're very helpful and they can teach you a lot of tricks that they've learned over the years. There's also a book that I'd like to recommend.
Mm-hmm.
It's by Dex. He's out of Florida, Dex,
Okay.
and it's Whips in the Dungeon. It's a very good book. He also does YouTube videos, and he's very thorough. And I've never met him personally. I've talked to him, but I think he's a fantastic. He's got a fantastic book, and the YouTube videos are good. But there's only so much you can do when you're reading. There's much more that you could do with hands-on.
I'd imagine that unlike other forms of impact, it does take a lot more practice because you have to do a lot more to aim whips.
Indeed. Uh, I didn't really know anything about whips when I got here, and I have been playing with them for 35 years, and I still learn something new all the time. And one of the biggest things that you can do to get where you want to go is practice, 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 and more practice. There isn't any other way to do it except practice. And you don't have to practice on a person. You can practice with a pillow or a sheepskin, as Dex uses a lot, so that way you can see where the tail is actually hitting, because it is going really, really fast. And I have been, I've been doing this for a long time. And just so you know, the reason a whip cracks is because it's moving beyond the speed of sound, which is 761.2 at sea level, um, and it changes with altitude and atmospheric temperature, uh, or 343 meters per second, or 1235 kilometers, and it creates a vacuum in space. And whips are also the first man-made object to break the speed of sound barrier.
Okay, that little bit of science just sounded sexier in hell. Thank you for
You're
sharing
welcome. And
that.
the whips actually go anywhere between 700 and 900 miles per hour. FYI.
Wow. That's amazing.
Well, I did do my research.
So, are there particular safety things you have to be concerned about that you wouldn't have to be for other forms of impact play?
Absolutely. One of the things is you want to know your skills, and I can't stress that enough. Uh, I wouldn't play with somebody for the first time who's never picked up a whip before. They're they're uh, they're edgy and they're dangerous. Um, so one of the things that is most important is I always start a little further back and I work my way in. And I don't, you don't want to come off throwing that whip as hard as you can the first time, honestly, because you do that, you're going to scare somebody away. You come in because everybody says, hit me as hard as you can with a whip. No, 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 no. You come in soft and you work your way up. So being back far enough away from a person and then moving forward and starting out slow and soft and working your way up. Also, one of the other things I have learned over the years is, um, if someone's got something in their mouth and they can't speak, or they're deaf, because I have played with deaf people, um, I use hand signals because it's just easier. And when I get to the spot where I should be, where I'm just first starting the skin, I have the person who's standing for me raise their hand so I know that I'm at my spot. And then I look at where I am because every time you leave that spot, that process starts all over again. And I just start further back and move forward. Although I pretty much know where I am after the first time after they tell me, but I still want them to tell me, yeah, you're where you're supposed to be.
Nice.
So with whips, are we always hitting with the end of the whip, or does it vary by different types of whip, or just personal preference?
Like the yeah, you're always hitting with the end for sure. Um, Unless you're doing something different, I guess you could use the handle as an impact toy. I'm always looking for different ways to do impact. But there's only like 3 to 4 inches of the end of the whip that you want to use. And, some people will just play with the fluff. There's a little end of the cracker that's got fluff on it. And that's going to be very sensual. That's going to be, softer. It's not going to cut. However, uh, if you go a little further and you do lashes, so maybe using 2 to 3 inches of the tail of the cracker is what I'm saying. You're probably gonna do
Mm-hmm.
a little more severity, or even cut at that point.
Gotcha.
So something to be aware of is that uh, if you've what was it? If you get somebody's skin with the cracker and the fluff, you're talking about cutting, meaning like it can actually break the skin just a little
Not
bit.
usually with the fluff, but if you're doing a little further
Okay.
down, like using 2 to 3 inches of it,
Mm-hmm.
depending on how you use it, you would break the skin, you know, but you can do it without breaking the skin as well. And that takes years of practice to learn how to do.
Cool.
So if you're wanting to do blood play, wanting to
Mhm.
draw blood, just faster, harder, stronger, or is there more to
There's
it than
more to
that?
it than that. Again, you want to start out slow and work your way up to that. How I think about whip play is music. There are ebbs and flows, and there are mountains and valleys, and that's the way I play with the whip. So I'll start off working my way up, going up, going up, going up, and then maybe coming back down a little bit. Then I start up again, going up, 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 and then I bring it back down again. Because you want to play at a level where that person has their skills. And because you come out, if you come out blazing, with, I like to use a point system, so 1 through 10. So if you come out with a 9, uh, that's going to be a bit much for a person to take at the very beginning. Even with experienced people, I don't usually do that. Uh,
Mm.
and then, but working your way up, they get the flow of it. And like I said, it's like music, so it goes up and down, up and down, up and down. And the longer you can do that, the longer your scene will be, and the farther you can go. And you would, you know, I like to use a weighted whip when I'm gonna definitely do blood play because they're a little heavier.
Because the weights are at the tail towards the cracker end
The
of the whip.
the shot usually goes
The weight.
for about 3/4 of the length. It just depends on the
Okay.
whip maker's style and what they do, but usually 3/4 of it, and the tail part of it is usually not weighted.
Okay. And that lends to the what was it? If you're doing blood play, that the weighted whip lends to the extra little bit of something that you might need in order to intentionally break skin of where you would like it to be.
Yes, I mean you can do it without. uh, with a shot in it, it's just a little harder
Mm-hmm.
to do. It takes a lot longer. Whereas I don't have to work as hard if I've got a shot whip. Hmm.
Completely fair.
So, a couple years ago, I picked up a bullwhip at Goodwill. I have to assume it is a crappy costume whip, but how would people know if what they're wanting to buy is a good whip, a quality whip, versus, a piece of crap?
Whew, that's a loaded question, Rabbi. Um,
Okay.
it's a lot. Um, Most things that you see you know, i- in places where they don't sell whips, they're usually not as good a quality. I would say go to a reputable whip maker. There are some that I could, that I definitely recommend, but I would look on FetLife if you wanted a quality whip, as opposed to going to, you know, the the sex shops. Not that you can't find them there, but a whip maker's gonna, they'll do specifically what you want, and events, you can buy things at events. They're going to be more quality. Um, i have i have one that I show, uh, that came from, like, I don't know, I don't even know where it came from, probably Goodwill, I don't know. And it is just a piece of garbage, and it's costumey, or even like the ones you see
Hmm.
at around Halloween. Those are not ones that I would use on a person. I would make sure that it's braided correctly, and uh, if you wanted it loaded with shot, not loaded with shot. Our people are the best people who make them because they know what it's like.
What does braided correctly mean?
Well, there are, it's what it's called is plaiting, and this is a big deal for a lot of people. And plaiting is the number of strands that the whip is braided at its widest point. So a 16 plait would start with 16 for about halfway down the whip. Then the whip maker drops some of the strands, and are put into the whip's core so that it can taper to the end, making it 6 to 8 strands by the end. Standard whips usually are braided with four seams. Three are visible, and you're able to see it in a V formation. And so for your math people, you know, you have four seams, and they have three strands. So 4 times 3 is 12, and that would be a 12 plait whip. Um, so the higher the plait, so some of them are more. You can get, uh, I don't know, I've seen up to 32. Um, but the best way, and easiest way, is if there's a tag on it, they'll have two numbers. And the first number will be referring to the plaiting, and the second number will be the number refers to the count on the thong. So this rule's not set in stone, but if you don't know, just ask. Like, I can look at a whip now and figure out how many plaits are on something. And not to say that an 8 plait whip, which for me is my personal favorite. I've used one whip for over 35 years, and it's an 8 plait. I love it. I go to it all the time.
Wow.
But I also have a 20 plait whip. So the more plaits you have, the higher the cost. Yeah,
Gotcha.
and
Okay.
then also with higher plaits, your your strands are thinner, so they're easier to break, and it could cause damage to the whip depending on how it's used if it's used incorrectly.
Gotcha. And if you damage any of the plaits, does that mean your whip then has to be, I guess, rebraided in order to be usable again, or is it like, hey, we're done, like it's broken, we're done?
I haven't had this personally happen to me, but uh,
Okay.
I think once one of these strands break, I would say that it doesn't work anymore, and you would probably need a new one at that point. There's no repairing because it's worked all the way in, so you would have to get rid of that whip and get a new one. But
Huh.
if you take care of them and you use them and you love them, they will last you a lifetime.
So then, what are some good tricks to taking care of your whip? It's a great leading question. I'm like, you made a comment. It made for a nice segue.
You did, didn't you? Um,
Mm-hmm.
I am. Let's see, how do I want to do this? Um, I like to uh, clean mine all down once a year for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I wipe them down with, you know, with you can use soapy water to wipe them down, and or a leather cleaner, one of the two. And then
Mm-hmm.
after it dries, and you should always hang them, by the way. They should always be hung as opposed to
Okay.
coiled up.
Oh, okay.
Um, so once that part is done, you can use it's something called Picard's. Uh, it's a conditioner, and FYI, Picard's is sold uh, in little tubs at Duluth Trading, and they're perfect because I made the mistake of buying a big tub early on because I thought, oh, I need lots of this. No, you don't need much. You need to put a little bit in your hand, maybe the size of a dime, if that, and just run it through the
Mm-hmm.
whole, through all the way from the butt or the button all the way down to the point. And if it's a bullwhip and it's got a lash or a fall on it, you want to put that on there too. You don't need to put that on the nylon part. The nylon
Okay.
part is the part that actually hits a person. Um, I use uh, to clean those a germicidal solution, um, like Meticide FD. It's a one-step cleaner, and this is what they use for
Mm-hmm.
medical cleaning. Like they clean tools and spaces and stuff. And you can put that on there, but you need to let it dry before you ever use it because you don't want to apply that to the skin at all.
Gotcha.
Uh-huh.
Okay, thank you.
So we're hanging them instead of coiling them because the leather will take on that shape?
Yes, yes, they will. And you don't want them coiled. You want them to stay in one, in a full length position because they will.
And just is that just during cleaning or all the
I do
time?
it all the time. When I'm not
Okay,
using them or carrying them, they're hung up.
gotcha.
And I don't let the sun beat down on them either.
I'm sure that dries it out really
Absolutely, like
fast.
any other leather, it will dry them out, and you don't want that.
No. No, not
Uh-uh.
particularly.
You've talked about leather ones. You've talked about or paracord ones. Are there any other common materials that whips are made out of?
Not usually, not that I can think of. They're usually just
Okay,
those two. And the paracord ones, believe it or not, you can throw those in the wash. You can put those in the washer. Yeah.
Nice. That's a easy
Yeah.
cleanup way, or method
Yeah.
of cleaning.
So, what is your favorite whip in your toy bag?
It is a 4 foot. Oh, I don't know if I can say that. Too late. And uh,
You're good.
well, he doesn't like to sell to our people. Uh, yeah,
Oh,
he's not one of the people who like to sell to us. He's not a one of our people. Let's put it that way. No worries. Um, and so I have an 8 plat 4 foot whip that I absolutely love, and I go to it all the time, and it's like butter. It really is. It wiggles all the way from the top to the bottom, and it's my all-time favorite, and it's my go-to all the time. If I'm playing with somebody new, I'm gonna go with that whip. And it's a single tail, by the way.
nice.
Gotcha. Is there I mean, what's a typical length on one of these? Because I've heard of them being like 16 foot long. You were talking about a 4 foot one.
Single tails are usually 4 feet, and a bullwhip is usually longer, 6 to 20 feet. A black snake and a single tail falls within the black snake family. So usually, and black snakes can also be as long as a bullwhip as well. Single tails are specific to being 4 feet long because they're used for dog sleds. And I kind of thought it was funny when I first bought this because I lived in San Diego and they're for dog sleds. And I'm sure the whip maker, whose name I won't say, um, they probably thought, why is this guy living in San Diego buying a dog sled whip? You know, you
Well,
know,
we're just practicing our dog sledding in San
absolutely.
Diego.
Although it was probably done in the sand as opposed to snow. Hmm.
True.
Hmm.
This is true.
So, what makes you passionate about whips as opposed to other forms of kink?
Whew. That is the one, the one thing that uh, I know most about. It really is. And, having a whip at 7 years old, because an uncle brought one back from Texas. It was an old cow whip, a black and white cow whip. And I've been playing with whips for a very long time because this year I'm going to turn 60. And so from 7 to 60, and they seem to be what trips my trigger an awful lot. I there's nothing like seeing someone dance in front of me. And when I say dance, I'm doing air quotes, just so you know. Uh, I don't, because you can't really see me. And
Right.
I don't like to put people in bondage when I'm playing with whips because I want them to move about so that they can shake off you know the pain, and they can usually go a little further. So I love to see them dance is what it boils down to. And when I'm really uh, uh, I know how much pain they cause, and that is also definitely a thing that I absolutely love. Maybe I'm a modern day Marquis de Sade, but if someone is uh, having a good time, I'm usually having a good time. And if you hear me laughing, because I will, uh, I'm having a very good time. So it's something that brings me joy. How's that?
That's
Hmm.
a good thing. Um, so there are many folks out there that don't qualify themselves as, or like they wouldn't label themselves, I should say, as being a heavy bottom to do whips, like at least in their opinion. Um, can somebody who is a lighter bottom still enjoy whips?
Absolutely. And I think uh, I have taught many people about whips, even people that were terrified of whips and people that have had bad experiences. I think this all falls back on the whip thrower. If you start at a 10 and this person says, yeah, go for it, that's not the way to start. And so I have people that I have taught, or people that I've played with, I don't want to say taught, um, although I've taught them this too. You can use whips for very sensual play. There are many things you can do with a whip that that don't involve, you know, going to blood or cracking the skin open or any of that. Like I have put a whip just around, someone's throat, just lightly go around it you know, and I have just used the fluff part of doing whipping, and that's more of a sensual play. And I will uh, play with a person if they've never done this before. That's where we're going to start because I a funny but true story. I had a friend who years and years and years ago, this is probably when I first started, she said to me, "Oh, I don't want you to leave any marks on me. I don't want you to break open my skin or any of that stuff." And I'm like, "Okay, I can do that." Because I like to say I can hit the side of a barn. And so she didn't want any marks or any of that stuff. So we had this beautiful sensual you know scene, and I'm doing some aftercare, and she looks at me and she goes, "Next time we play, make me into a hamburger." And I'm
My
like,
goodness.
"What?" And she has played that way ever since. Ever since.
Wow.
And when I would give a whip class in San Diego, she would be my person that would do the demo with me because I could take her to blood in 20 minutes.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. But I'm gonna guess she was also judging your skill as to, hey, I want you to play with me in this whip and don't leave any marks, but still let me have a good time.
But that was her first time. That was her very
Oh,
first
yeah.
time. And after that, she was like,
Wow.
nope, I don't want this soft stuff anymore. I want you to make me into a hamburger." She's an amazing player.
That's amazing.
So, circling
hmm
back, tell us about whip art.
My whip art. I haven't done it in a while, but I did do it for a long time. And what I would do is I had a paracord. Well, at first I used one of my leather whips, which was a big mistake. Don't do that. Uh, so I got a paracord whip, and I would uh, put uh, paint on the end of the cracker, and I would throw it against a canvas. So this way I could see what kind of marks I could make with it, and it just kind of evolved from there. And I'd be happy to send you some of the pictures of the paintings that I do have. Um,
And I will put those pictures in with the chapter markers.
and I tried to make a go of it for a while, but uh, it wasn't something that a lot of people were interested in. A lot of people that have dungeons were interested in it, or I did a few
Hmm.
commission pieces, and as far as I know, there's only one other person in the world, and I've actually talked to him. He's in Australia that he does paint with a whip as well. So I'm usually 4 feet away from the canvas and uh, throwing it. And my canvases are usually what I like to use as a 12 by 12 space. Although I have gone down to a 4 by
Nice.
4 space. And I also have a 3 foot by
Wow.
3 foot that take forever.
Can
Mm.
imagine.
So is it abstract, or are you making an actual pictures?
They're always abstract. Uh,
Okay.
they're always, yeah, they're sort of like um, pointillism, if you know anything about art.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I like to call it whippleism. So they're little marks, and I have on a big canvas. I have one in particular because after I did that, I'm like, I'm not doing another big one like this anymore. But I have the 3 foot one, and I did make a tree out of it. So it just most of the time they're just abstract though.
So before we transition into the part of the show we like to call Inside the Kinkster Studio, is there anything else we need to know about whips?
Yes, or more so for other people. How's that?
Okay.
Um,
Hmm.
and this is for the whip catchers or bottoms. Um, know your tops. You know, don't let the top decide for you. You have just as much uh, say in what's happening. And the other thing is, I like to think of, you know, things that don't practice on a person first. That's really a big thing. And a top note is don't be afraid of your whips. You're going to be for sure, because you are going to hit yourself. And I suggest wearing a wide brim hat and glasses of some sort when you're first learning, because you are going to hit yourself. And eventually, that fear will go away. But if it doesn't go away, again, you might want to try a different sport, because we have plenty to choose from. And
Hmm.
you know, and bottoms, please know the skill level of your tops. And that's with everything. It's not just whips, but and whips is one of those things that uh, if 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 someone said to me, "Let's go have a scene with whips the first time," I suggest declining that. Unless you know the skills of that person. It's not something to play with the first time. Unless, of course you're asking
Hmm.
me, then that's a whole different story. But, uh, you know, just, just, and know your monster. And what I'm saying when I say this is, um, you have to learn who you are. This took me a long time to learn. I had to know who I am and my abilities. And, I had to learn how to keep control of my monster and not go too far. So, you got to be able to read the person's body, and, and there is fun. There's fun in all of this. And breathing is really important for the whip catcher. They need to, they need to learn how to breathe, and I coach people on breathing when I'm playing with whips. So, I think those are a lot of little pointers that people don't think of.
Good
Mhm.
tips.
Definitely.
So let's get to know WhipFather a little bit
Oh
better.
Lord.
Here's my first question. Have you always been WhipFather, or did you have another name in the beginning and slowly acquired the WhipFather moniker?
Uh, it was usually just my name. And when I involved FetLife, I didn't really want to put my real name out there, so I chose WhipFather. Um, and on Facebook, I'm Mark Smokes, and so I have a big fetish for cigars as well. So there's always been that as well. But WhipFather has always been something that I thought, it's kind of nice. It shows the daddy side of me, and it shows whips, so it shows the sadistic side and the sir side. So, it just sort of transpired that way.
Fair
Hmm.
enough.
Like it fits you, so Let's see here. So, what are three words that you would describe your play as?
Oh, consensual. I'm all about consent. Open, because I'm open to all kinds of play when it comes to whips or anything else for that matter. Um, and I'm edgy. I'm definitely edgy because I like to go right up to the line and then stick my toes over the line if I can.
Just
Hmm.
creeping right there.
What would you say your biggest failure has been in kink, and what did you learn from it?
Biggest failure. You know, I can't really think of one, but the my biggest failure is um, something that most people don't know, and it's it's something I forget to mention sometimes. Is uh, it's not a failure; it's a plus. But I am blind in one of my eyes, so I have no depth perception. Yeah,
Wow.
and I play with whips. Um, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so I
Okay, that's an amazing feat
Yeah,
right there.
so, it is something that I've had to deal with my whole life, and my eye just never finished developing as a child, so it's a developmental problem, which fortunately today, if they find it soon enough within the first 6 months of a child's birth, they can correct it. But at the time when I was born, they didn't know how to correct it. So, it's not really a failure. It has served me well. But if I had two eyes, it would have been a lot easier.
Sure. I mean, in some ways, I think that is an asset when it comes to playing with whips, because you're not guessing at distances where other people might be. Is
That
that
is
fair to say?
very fair to say. That's why I know where it's going to go. I know exactly, you know, in a general area, I know where it's going to go.
So, kind of, I guess, what is the biggest thing, since, no mistakes, at least not being able to think of it, what is the biggest thing that you've learned from on your journey? Like, the biggest thing you've learned?
My biggest thing was learning my monster for sure. Uh, when I was younger, I didn't know, you know, what, I like to think of myself as sort of like Jekyll and Hyde, and I didn't really know, that monster. And it took me a really long time to learn that monster because I was terrified that when I started in this journey that someone was gonna pick me up and I was gonna be chopped up into little bitty pieces and never heard from again, which is not true. And now after all these
Sure.
years, now I'm the one who chops up people into little bitty pieces and they're never heard from again. But I kind of wish that I had understood and knew what that monster was earlier in my journey.
Fair. Definitely fair.
What would you say your catchphrases are?
Oh, I don't know. The one I use a lot is "I'm the nicest sadist you will ever meet." Um, I'm thinking about having that put on my epitaph. Um, but just to be clear, I'm still a sadist. And the other one I use at work all the time, and again, not being within your presence right now, uh, my hand shakes in front of my body and it says, "This is hard to resist."
Yes. So, one of my favorite questions that I absolutely love to ask everybody, what's your favorite swear word?
You know, I try not to swear the older I've gotten. It's kind of weird. Maybe I'm just old. But I would say my favorite swear word, because I use it all the time, and it's really not
Hmm.
really a hard word. It's God damn it. I get mad, and those are the first words that come out of my mouth, so it's got to be my favorite.
That works. That
Mm-hmm.
absolutely
Mm-hmm.
works.
And then we'll wrap up with my favorite question to ask. If you had to have sex with one Muppet, which Muppet would it be and why?
You know, this is hard because I've got three choices there. Um, but I'm only gonna pick one. Uh, it would have to be Beaker, and the reason
Oh my gosh.
I know, and the reason I pick him is I think if I was whipping Beaker, he would have fantastic sounds coming out of him, and it would totally make me laugh.
That is awesome, and I can totally see that.
And I have no idea why, but I knew you were going to say Beaker. I was like, yep, WhipFather's going to pick Beaker.
The other ones was the Swedish Chef and Doctor or Uncle Deadly.
Oh, yeah. Took me a hot minute to put the face with Uncle Deadly, yeah.
I just think he's cool.
All right, well, that about does it for today. Thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for telling us all about whips.
Yes.
For our listeners, upcoming synagogue in-person and virtual classes on electroplay, chain fisting, knife play. Check our website for days, times, locations, all that kind of fun stuff. But that's it. That's our show. Say goodnight, little bit.
Good night, little bit.
Follow us on Facebook, FetLife, Twitter, Tumblr, and YouTube as Synagogue BDSM, and on Instagram and TikTok as Synagogue Kink. If you enjoyed or learned something from this podcast, consider making a donation via PayPal, Cash App, Venmo, Patreon, or Ko-fi. Username Synagogue, or find those links to all of those on our website, synagoguebdsm.com. Remember, that's synagogue with an I. Also on the website, links to past episodes, upcoming classes, book us as educators, shop our store, and more.
Synagogue hosts and guests are subject matter experts but are not the expert. We believe that, outside of violating consent, there is no wrong way to do kink, except to think your way is the only way. This show is presented from a RAC, risk-aware consensual kink point of view, and not SSC, safe, sane, consensual, because every individual's definition of safe is different based on their own risk profile. The use of the word safe on this show fits our definition of safe, and that does not have to be your definition. Opinions expressed by guests on the show are those of the person expressing the opinion, not of the show.
Just a reminder, we try to make our content as inclusive as possible, regardless of gender, orientation, role in the lifestyle, etc. But we do inherently speak from our own point of view. For the most part, substitute our identity with your own to make it work. We want to know when we make a mistake, so we can learn and grow from those mistakes. So if you feel like we did say something that is genuinely offensive, we encourage you to let us know. Reach out to us with your questions, comments, or concerns via our website or call us at 469-269-0403.
Brought to you today by the letters and the number.
San Diego High School Football Room!